Okay, we're going to start Chapter 12, Signs, Symptoms, and Ill-Defined Conditions. Okay, so the first thing you need to do is to know the two definitions. Sign is an objective evidence of disease that can be observed by the examining physician. Okay, so where a symptom is an observation reported by the patient, but is not confirmed objectively by the physician. So again, big difference here. So a sign, the physician can, with his eyes or examination, see, or a symptom is what the patient is telling the physician. Okay, so how are they classified? They're classified in two ways. These are like more into Chapter 18 of your ICD-10 CM. Signs and symptoms is principal diagnosis. Codes for these are from 18. They cannot be used as principal diagnosis or reason for outpatient counters when a related diagnosis has been established. So a couple of different things. So a patient came in for chest pain and they decide that basically that they have a myocardial infarction. So what they're saying is that for an outpatient, you can't use chest pain as the principal diagnosis. You have to use myocardial infarction. And keep in mind, chest pain won't even be coded because it's integral to the myocardial infarction. Let's go through possible probable again. We talked about this in past chapter. So when a diagnosis described as possible, probable, and so on at the time of discharge and treated differently depending on whether the patient's inpatient or outpatient. So if they're inpatient, again, it is considered to be established. If they're outpatient, the diagnosis is not considered to be an established diagnosis. So keep in mind probable. If it's outpatient for probable, you cannot use that as a diagnosis. So go back through those rules that we've already went to. Symptom codes as principal diagnosis, they can be correctly designated as a principal diagnosis when there is no related condition identified and the symptom is the reason for that encounter. Okay, so other situations, the presenting symptoms are transient and there's no definite diagnosis. The patient is referred elsewhere for further study because they cannot make a diagnosis, possibly in the ER or observation. A more precise diagnosis cannot be made for any other reason, just because possibly all the tests are coming back negative. The symptom is related to the outpatient setting without additional workup, required to arrive at a more definite diagnosis. Provisional diagnosis of a sign or symptom is made for the patient who fails to return for further investigations. So again, a lot of these you just can't code. Okay, so symptom codes is first listed. When can we code them as the first? You can do this in an outpatient encounter because keep in mind, in outpatient, they usually don't do as many tests as they would for an inpatient. Okay, so additional codes. The biggest thing here, you can use a sign or symptom when it's not integral to the underlying condition. So if it's not related, so let's say we have a patient coming in with nausea and vomiting, and they end up diagnosing them with gastroenteritis. Okay, you cannot code the nausea and the vomiting because it's related. So keep that in mind. A lot of your symptom signs codes are R codes. So when coding them, be very cautious and make sure they are not related to what the primary principal diagnosis is. We also have abnormal findings. Okay, so you're not going to see these too often for an inpatient hospital care. You're going to see these more for outpatient abnormal findings like abnormal lab work. And the reason being because if you're an inpatient, they're going to figure out why your lab work's abnormal. So once again, if you have a low hemoglobin, is it because you have anemia? They're going to probably run additional tests and come out with a more substantial diagnosis. Okay, so just with the Glasgow Coma Scale, make sure you review that. There is codes for, eye-opening, responsiveness, motor, and again, these are all on a scale on how well the patient passes each of these tests. Okay, so let's go through stroke scale. Again, we have different codes for that. And the only other thing that I'm going to tell you to do is just make sure you read through the chapter. This isn't that hard of a chapter. It's actually fairly easy. If you have any questions, make sure you ask.